Hello, fellow colleagues and lecturer. We, Group 1, will be presenting on Peter Rabbit. The group members are Akia Moore, Esther Monroe, Swarswati Prasad, Soma Odit, Leah Mills, and myself, Chandi Prasad. So we will be presenting on the tale of Peter Rabbit. So I will now go into the story. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits. Their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the roof of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dear," said old Mrs. Rabbit, one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but do not go into Mr. Gregor's garden. Your father had an accident there, was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadful frightened. He rushed over to the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on all 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have gotten away, although he had not unfortunately ran into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue leather jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some. Friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be continuing from Miss Chandy's story or part after himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon on the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind, and rushed to the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed, Achoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting three plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter now sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He was scared, right? He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. So Peter asked her to wait at the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still. But now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He has heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. So he then went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard a noise of a hoe. Scratch, 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 scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow. And then he peeped over. He peeped over. What do you think happened next? The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Oh my! Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he can along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoe for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds.
This is Akia Moore, and I will be presenting on behalf of my other colleague, Soma Audit. Hello, colleagues. This is Akia Moore again, and I will be continuing from Swat Sati's part of the story. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in the fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime, but Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. Hand you over to my next colleague, which will be myself again. Hello, fellow colleagues and lecturer. My name is Akia Moore, and I was tasked to do the summary to find the protagonist, the antagonist, the conflict, the resolution, and why is it suitable for children. For the story that we chose, The Tale of Peter Rabbit. The summary. The Tale of Peter Rabbit is about a mischievous rabbit named Peter, who disobeys his mother's warnings and sneaks into Mr. McGregor's garden. The story begins with Peter and his siblings, Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, being told to stay out of the garden because their father met his end there. Despite this warning, Peter, driven by curiosity and mischief, ventures into the garden, eating vegetables and causing trouble. However, he is caught by Mr. McGregor, leading to a high-stake chase through the garden. After several narrow escapes, Peter finally returns home, exhausted but safe. His siblings, who obey their mother, enjoy a calm evening, while Peter is put to bed with chamomile tea due to his actions. Now, the protagonist of this story is Peter Rabbit. Peter Rabbit is a curious and adventurous young rabbit who symbolizes the impulsiveness and curiosity of childhood. The antagonist. The antagonist is Mr. McGregor. Mr. McGregor, the stern gardener, represents authority and the dangers of this disobedience. Now, the conflict of this story. The central conflict is between Peter and Mr. McGregor, symbolizing the clash between youthful curiosity and adult rules. Peter's internal conflict between obeying his mother and satisfying his adventurous nature is also evident. The resolution of this story is when Peter escapes the garden and returns home, but his adventure teaches him the consequences of disobedience. He learns about danger and is reminded of the importance of listening to his mother's advice. Now, why is it suitable for children? Obedience and consequences. Children learn the importance of listening to authority figures through Peter's experience. Secondly, curiosity and adventure. The story acknowledges children's natural curiosity while showing that it must be tempered with caution. Thank you. I'll hand you over to my next colleague.
Good evening, lecturer. Good evening, colleagues. My task is to say the developmental appropriateness. The simple language and narrative structure align with Jean Pigot's preparational stage, ages 2 to 7, where children learn through concrete experience. Peter's impulsive action mirrors the developmental behaviors of children, making him relatable. Emotional engagement. Peter's fear and eventual relief allow young readers to explore complex emotions in a safe and controlled environment. The illustration enhances the story's accessibility by visually depicting Peter's adventure and danger. Imaginative appeal. Animals, rabbits, wearing clothes and living in a burrow stimulate imagination, which is critical for childhood creativity. The setting in the garden offers a magical, adventurous backdrop that captivates young readers. Research support. According to Maria Nicogio, children's lecturer comes of age. Stories like Peter Rabbit provide moral lessons without being overly didactic, making them appealing and effective for children. Reading stories with animal characters help children emphasize with others, as research on social and emotional learning in literature suggests. Thank you.
Hi again, this is Akia Moore. On behalf of Liam Mills, I will be presenting the emotional appeal and literary element or the characterization. So the emotional appeal for readers, the tale of Peter Rabbit evokes several emotions. Firstly, nostalgia. Many adults remember hearing or reading this story as children, which makes it a treasured classic. Secondly, relatability. Children often identify with Peter's curiosity and impulsiveness, recalling times they disobeyed and learned lessons the hard way. Thirdly, personal reflection. For example, the story might remind readers of an incident in which they faced consequences for exploring forbidden areas or taking risks. Additionally, Peter's escape may evoke a sense of relief and triumph, reinforcing the idea that mistakes can be overcome. Now for the literacy element or the characterization. Characterization plays a key role in the appeal of the tale of Peter Rabbit. Firstly, Peter Rabbit. His mischievous and adventurous personality resonates with children, who often see themselves in his actions. Despite his flaws, Peter is lovable and his eventual return home offers a comforting resolution. Secondly, Mr. McGregor. Portrayed as a gruff and intimidating figure, Mr. McGregor represents the consequences of poor decisions. His exaggerated reactions, for example, chasing Peter, create tension and excitement. Thirdly, Mother Rabbit. She is nurturing and a wise figure, guiding her children with care and love. Her gentle punishment of Peter at the end reflects a balance of discipline and compassion. By creating characters that are vivid and relatable, Beatrix Potter ensures the story resonates emotionally and intellectually with young readers. That will be the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening and thank you for your time.